A colleague once told me that caregiving was as natural as breathing out and breathing in. And I really have to take issue with that because in my experience, caregiving is a very difficult journey, one that people often aren't prepared for. Caregivers are all around us. They're everywhere. We have folks who have been caring for kids with developmental disabilities for a lifetime. We have people who receive devastating diagnoses. In an instant, the caregiver is born. We live in a world of violence and opioid addiction, and caregivers are just everywhere. In my experience, I've had several significant areas of caregiving. The first was with my daughter, and I didn't identify as a caregiver in the very beginning. But when I was faced with violent behaviors, with her hearing voices, with medication decisions, with being literally a prisoner in my own home because she could not be left alone, I was more than a parent, and I needed to take care of myself in those times. I didn't really know how. The other time is my mother. She acquired dementia. She was quite frail, and I brought her home to live with my husband and I. And I feel very fortunate that I was able to do that. But in the middle of the night, one night, I heard this loud crash, and I woke up and I went running downstairs, and I found her splayed out on the bathroom floor in a lot of pain. I spent 5 days in the hospital, morning to night. I was working from the hospital, and I was trying to manage the rest of my life from the hospital. And the day that I was supposed to take her home, I was kneeling next to her bed, and all around me are interns and doctors and nurses. And I looked up at that doctor and I said, I'm between a rock and a hard place here. I swore I would never put her in a nursing home. But I did. I set up a rehab, and I spent 10 days at that nursing home as well. But in that time, a friend of my mother said, I'm coming down from New Hampshire to visit. And she took one look at me being in that whole situation for days. She put her hands on my shoulders and she said, you need to go home. And I said, I can't go home. I can't leave her here. I got to make sure she eats. I have to make sure that she knows why she's here. I can't let her think that I abandoned her here. And she said, you need to go home, and I will be here all day tomorrow. I don't want to see your face. And that was the biggest gift that anybody could have given me in that moment, because I had an opportunity to reflect. I had an opportunity to sleep. I had an opportunity to check in with my kids and everything else that was going on. And I had an opportunity to rejuvenate myself so that I could go in and handle what I needed to handle. In both of those circumstances, I was exhausted, I was isolated, I didn't have the information that I needed, and what I needed most of all was respite. And respite simply is a time to get away from the responsibilities of caregiving, to rejuvenate, to rest, and to come back at it fresh so that you can be your best self for your loved one. Caregivers definitely need to say, I need help. But there are things that stand in the way for caregivers. They don't believe that anybody else can do it as well as they can. They don't necessarily have the financial resources to bring somebody into their home. They worry about their loved one not being taken care of. They worry about them being in distress. And so you have to find a way to build relationships with people in your life who can provide respite, whether it's volunteer programs or whether it's through the long-term care system. But what we know is caregivers provide the bulk of all the services in the long-term care system. And so it's really hard for them to say, I need help. But if they do, then they'll experience what I experienced, which was, holy cow, I really needed to get away. And I didn't recognize it until I was able to do it. There are literally millions of caregivers in New York State, and every one of them has their own story. And my message is, your story matters. And you need to tell your story and share your story because we all need to support one another. The New York State Caregiving and Respite Coalition exists because caregivers are in distress. Literally millions of caregivers in New York State face these challenges every day. The Coalition speaks with one voice. Today, I'm encouraging you to join your voice with ours in the New York State Caregiving and Respite Coalition. We have so much work to do, and we can do it better if we all do it together.